Welcome back to The Bible is Art, where we explore the literary artistry of the Bible. And this week, we're looking at bodies and body parts in the book of Daniel. Daniel frequently talks about bodies and particular body parts. Hair, head, nails, knees, feet, bowels. There are dreams about bodies. Bodies thrown in furnaces and to lions' dens, and bodies being resurrected. And the more you read about these bodies, the more you realize that the author is trying to do something. He's doing something similar to Plato in the Republic, where Socrates is trying to understand justice in a city. And to do that, he says we must understand what justice is in a person or in a soul. And justice in the soul happens when the three parts of the soul, the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive, are all in harmony. But the important part for us is that there's a connection between the person and the city. You see, Daniel was written to encourage the Israelites who were exiled in a foreign country in Babylon. So Daniel presents images of two bodies, a good body and an evil body, or a righteous body and a worldly body. And Daniel unfolds these characters and these destinies of these corporate bodies. It's a beautiful literary construction because every time or many times there's a body or body parts, those are putting together an image of these two corporate bodies, a righteous one and a wicked one, a righteous nation and a wicked nation. And these two bodies are contrasted, providing the Israelites in exile with two options. Let me show you how it works. The first picture of a body is Daniel's body, the good body in chapter 1. Daniel and his friends, if you remember, refuse to eat the king's food, but their bodies become strong. Unlike Adam in the garden who ate when he shouldn't have, Daniel refuses to eat, being a good Adam, refusing to receive his life from the worldly kingdom, and he becomes stronger for it. The next body is the worldly body, and we see this in chapter 2. King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a huge body made up of 4 different materials. And the author describes this body from head to toe in 7 parts. It's like the perfect worldly body. And Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar that these 4 materials parts symbolize 4 successive nations, and that Nebuchadnezzar is the first. He's the head of gold of this statue. Now, the destiny of this body is that it is smashed to pieces by a stone that's cut out from a mountain. So the picture is that in contrast to Daniel's strong body in chapter 1, the worldly body, even though it's larger and more impressive, is destined for destruction. In the next chapter, the worldly body continues. Nebuchadnezzar misinterprets the vision of the second chapter and makes a statue of himself, his body made out of gold, and requires everyone to bow down to the statue of his body. Notice, he's requiring everyone else's body to do something, to bow down. And if they don't, their bodies will be thrown into a fiery furnace. Well, Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, don't do it, and their bodies are thrown into a fiery furnace. Then the narrator tells us that the fire had not any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, and their cloaks were not harmed. Remember this. We're told about their hair and their clothing, and we will see these two things again. The nature of this righteous body, these righteous bodies of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that represent this corporate good body, is that even when it is attacked, God protects it. It's interesting that in Isaiah, God describes the exile as a fiery furnace. So the readers themselves are currently in a fiery furnace, in exile. In contrast, this worldly body is the kind of body that will burn people alive. Well, the next chapter opens up with the worldly body again. King Nebuchadnezzar's head is hurting from a bad dream. And in this dream, there's a huge tree that's chopped down. He wants to understand what it means, so he asks Daniel, and Daniel tells him that he, King Nebuchadnezzar, is the tree, and that he will be cut down because he's so prideful. More than that, he's going to become like an animal crawling around. Notice, something will happen to his body. His body will become subhuman. This is the character of worldly empires. They aspire to godlike natures, but will ultimately be cut down, becoming animalistic. In their very attempts to become great, they become less than what they are, transforming into the very opposite. It's like Hitler thought that he was a superior kind of person, but ended up acting as the most barbaric and subhuman. There's a reversal. The narrator tells us that Nebuchadnezzar does become like an animal, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair grew long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. Notice the contrast with the righteous bodies of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whose hair, even in fire, was not damaged, while Nebuchadnezzar can't even do the most basic grooming of his hair. And notice also, there's been a progression. You see, in the dream in chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar had this dream about what would happen in the future, that there would be this succession of kingdoms and that they would eventually be destroyed, but no damage happened then. Here, while his kingdom stays intact, his body, King Nebuchadnezzar's body, is attacked. You see, we're moving forward. Well, in the next chapter, in chapter 5, there's a new Babylonian ruler, Belshazzar. And he's having a feast. And during this feast, God's finger writes 4 words on the wall. And when Belshazzar sees this, his bowels gives way. He poops himself. And here we get a climactic and comedic moment in this theme of corporate bodies. Notice the worldly body further breaking down, the dirtiest part giving way. And what is contrasted with this dirty body? God's own body. You see, the righteous body has thus far in the book of Daniel been represented by righteous Israelites. But in some mysterious way, the righteous body, this big corporate body that's being presented, includes God's own body, his fingers. This is a theme that will develop into the body of Christ later in our story, but that's for another time. Here, this is the lowest, or almost the lowest, the worldly body gets, and it's the highest the righteous body gets. Well, at the end of this scene, the kingdom is taken away from Belshazzar, and the Babylonians are defeated by the Median king Darius. The story of this body has continued. You see, the bodies of Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar deteriorate, and their corporate body, the kingdom, is taken away. The next chapter is Daniel and the lion's den. When Daniel bows down on his knees to God, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his body is thrown into the lion's den, but protected by God. And once again, the prophets describe what happened to Israel in exile as being attacked by lions. Well, the climax of this bodily theme comes in chapter 7, where Daniel has a dream. Daniel has become like King Nebuchadnezzar, having dreams about nations, but Daniel is different. He's a good, wise king, and so he acts differently when he gets these dreams. He dreams of 4 animals who represent 4 kingdoms. But notice the deterioration. In King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, the nations were represented by a statue of a man's body, but here, that human body has become animals. in Daniel's dream, a bear, a lion, and a leopard. And these animals are just like what Nebuchadnezzar became. This worldly body has become subhuman, and these are composite creatures, actually, not even pure lions or bears, but they have multiple features from different kinds of animals. And actually, the last beast is so beastly that it's not even called an animal, just a beast. And this beast's body is destroyed and its body is burned with fire. This is the destiny and the character of this worldly body in rebellion against God's good body. But what about the healthy, good body? Well, you see, that body is represented by God himself in this climactic vision. He's called the Ancient of Days. And we are told about his body. That body is described. But what about the good, healthy body in this climactic vision? That body is represented by God's body himself, called the Ancient of Days. And we see his body. And we are told two things about his body. We are told about his hair and his clothing, an allusion back to the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story. In this climactic vision, God chooses to describe himself in the same way as those faithful men, identifying with them and their bodies. A beautiful image and a beautiful conclusion to this theme. Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video this week. I really appreciate it. If you got any questions, you can leave them below. If you want to support the channel, which would be wonderful, you can check out patreon.com/thebibleisart. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.